All right, welcome everyone to the VC panel. So you have just heard from Ajit and other sustainability executives from leading semi companies talking about sustainability goals and priorities and some of the challenges. Now we have assembled an impressive lineup of corporate VCs as well as sustainability investors to share their investment thesis around topics of semiconductor sustainability and discuss how venture capital can be leveraged to drive innovation for greener semiconductor manufacturing. So without further ado, let's bring up all the panelists. Perfect. All right. So welcome everyone. What I will do is I'm going to moderate today's VC panel discussion, and to kick things off, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce yourself, your company, and your funds. Perhaps I will start first for those of you who are not here at the early morning. My name is John Wei. I'm an investment director at Applied Ventures. Applied Ventures is the corporate venture arm for Applied Materials. We have been around for almost 2 decades, and we made venture investments into 90-something companies, had 35 exits, and including 4 IPOs in the last 2 years. So far, we have invested about $300 million into innovation startup companies. Our main investment areas include essentially up and down our value chain, include from semiconductor materials to manufacturing processes, equipment, and also downstream systems and applications. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to go by the sequence of you guys on my screen. So maybe Owen, you can start, introduce yourself.
Thanks, John. I was expecting that, so thank you. So yeah, I'm Owen Lozman. I'm the managing director at M Ventures. We're the corporate venture arm of Merck KGaA Darmstadt, Germany. In the US, we're known as EMD Performance or EMD Electronics. We just rebranded recently, so apologies for the slip there. We're a $400 million evergreen fund. We were set up in about 2008, but that was primarily investing in biotech. Our electronics fund was started in 2018. So we're a bit more the new kid on the block, but we're trying to catch up with you guys, especially you, John and Sean. And we've been investing across life science, healthcare, and more recently electronics and digital and sustainability. So these are the main focus areas of our parent organization. Within the electronics sector, we're investing mainly in the semiconductor and material space, and also in the display tech. So we're a material provider, but we also look more broadly. We've invested quite heavily in things like chip technologies across the value chain, as you do as well, in order that we can, put some mileposts out and see where the industry's heading. Many of these by default have been sustainable because of a lot of the innovation in neuromorphic computing and things like this. But more recently, that's kind of early last year, we decided that we needed to be a little bit more forceful in how we approach this. So I'm looking forward to discussing some of the strategies that we've employed to do that and sharing some ideas between us on how we can improve the situation there. So we're a strategic investor, but we primarily invest for financial and strategic return. And we're looking at first-in-class early-stage technologies. We tend to invest fairly early stage and try and support companies throughout their life and development. And not bring the weight of the large corporate material provider that we are, science technology company, to help support the startups to commercialization. So very much looking forward to the discussion today. And I guess I'll pass back to you, John. Thank you.
All right, Sung-ho?
Sure. My name is Sung-ho Yang. Many people call me Sung-hun or Sung, but just call me Sung. So I'm working for Samsung Ventures America. I joined Samsung 16 years ago, and then I worked as an engineer and then moved to Samsung Ventures 10 years ago. And then I have invested in semiconductor materials and equipment and software, some software companies. Samsung Ventures actually is one of strategy investment arm in Samsung, and we covers not only semiconductor but also consumer electronics and quite recently we started to look into bio sector as well. So we have more than 50 funds from our various business unit, and then 2.4 asset under management for now. Then we invest in about 200 million a year, and then half of them happens in United States. Our focus is in again semiconductors, consumer electronics and bio, and then even insurance business as well. And quite recently we started to invest in some of the ESG companies as well, because we raised a fund from those kind of business unit. So we are quite broad in terms of this space, but I directly focus on semiconductor sustainability today. Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Andy with Micron Ventures. So Micron Technologies is it's a great big memory and storage company, about 40 years old, headquartered in Idaho. And about 3 years ago now, we launched the AI fund in late 2019, or 2018. Initially, it was a $100 million fund. We've built that out. We've actually started deploying our second fund, a $200 million fund, which is pretty exciting. Really focused on artificial intelligence, right? My title is actually Director of Venture Capital AI Fund. And why AI? Well, it's a really growing category. We invest across industry, like how folks are using artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and specific industry verticals. We look a lot at Industry 4.0, mobility is a big space for us, healthcare, and we also look at enabling technologies underneath, like that core tech, like a lot of the folks on this call, semiconductor, new semiconductor architectures that make machine learning work better and faster and cheaper and more efficient, and also like tools that enable people to work with data easier. Micron as a memory and storage provider, we have an interesting role to play in the growth of the data economy, right? Like a lot of the world's information sits on our products, and so I think that's an exciting space to explore. The last industry vertical that we do is actually we call it Better Planet. I like whatever, jellyfish hats. I'm a hippie, but like really hardcore, looking at how can we deploy resources and support innovations that can improve the quality of life for folks that we sell products to, but also how can we improve our own operations. So one of the investments that one of the startups that we'll talk to later today, Aqua Membranes, we invested in really to drive sustainability innovation inside our own operations, and that's an exciting investment category that I'm just thrilled to be a part of and glad to be here.
All right, thank you, Andy. So really how this forum come together is really earlier in the year. I was talking to Andy about their investment in the Aqua Membrane, the water company, and we kind of branched out into the general sustainability investment in the semiconductor space. And a couple of things became clear to us. One, there's not enough discussion about sustainability within the semiconductor VC world and also the startup world. And two, I think between the two of us, we're not smart enough to figure this one on our own. So we need to bring all the experts and the great minds together and really have this conversation. So that's what led to today's forum. So next up, Kyle, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Kyle Teamey. I'm with Breakthrough Energy Ventures. So Breakthrough Energy Ventures, we're a venture capital fund focused on climate change. We invest across any kind of technology as long as it can have a substantial impact. We define substantial impact as 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. So we're looking for really, really big opportunities for the most part. And in terms of how we divide up the global economy, manufacturing, electricity, transportation, ag and food, buildings and infrastructure are the 5 areas we're investing in. We tend to invest fairly early. So We've done everything from seed stage and up, but I'd say like typically Series A, Series B is where we're playing most of the time. And we don't have a specific thesis as it relates to the semiconductor industry. But as we'll get into this, we definitely do investments that can touch on the semiconductor industry, and there's all sorts of interesting touch points across industries that should be fun to explore.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Sean.
All right, I'm Sean Doyle. I'm a managing director with Intel Capital. I've actually been at Intel Capital for 20 years. And my personal focus is really silicon design and manufacturing and Intel supply chain. So basically that means design tools and IPs that we use to design chips, anything that goes into our fabs and through our packaging and test facilities and process, and then also looking to enable our supply chain or platform customers, including components and related technologies. A little bit about Intel Capital. So we're actually an operating division of Intel, not a separate fund. I would say job one, we invest to support our existing businesses, help those grow. But we also have a charter to look for new business opportunities and invest in new interesting technologies and technology trends. We invest a few $100 million per year off our balance sheet. We're stage agnostic, so we can invest in seed stage opportunities up to public company or investments in public companies that are quite large. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of working across that whole spectrum in my time at Intel. And then our criteria, it's really a mixture of strategic relevance and financial return. Strategic relevance, it has to have a relevance to Intel. There has to be a thesis of why Intel would be a good investor for a certain company, and financial return also, financial viability, right? Is a situation, does it merit venture capital or equity investment being put to work? So that's kind of the very simplistic framework we use. And thanks for having me today.
Great. So as you can see, we have a terrific lineup of veteran investors, and so let's dive into some of the questions that I have prepared. But the audience, please feel free to submit your questions on in the Q&A chat box on the platform. So I guess the first question is, most of you guys are corporate VCs, representing semiconductor companies or electronics companies. So what are you hearing from your corporate mothership and business units regarding sort of the need for sustainability, and what are some of the drivers and business rationales for venture investment in semiconductor sustainability? Maybe I'll start with Andy.
Yeah, we're hearing go now, which is awesome. It's music to my ears. I started a sustainability company myself a few years back, and I remember talking to like corporate leaders about my innovations. Yeah, they weren't very good innovations, but there was a lot of kind of gentle patting on the head, and they were interested in what we were building, but they were very focused on bottom line, and sustainability was kind of an afterthought. It's very much a forethought right now, and across our operations, a lot of it is driven by our customers, like pushing that conversation forward, bringing it to light. But a lot of it is also executive leadership recognizing the need for sustainable operations across our manufacturing fleet. And so yeah, we have a lot of support, up, down, sideways, left to right inside of Micron to go fast and work with really aggressive startup founders, new technologies to integrate them into our operations and scale. It's an exciting time.
Wonderful. So the goal is really to find sustainability technologies and integrate that into your own operation.
Yep.
Excellent. Anybody else want to chime in here?
Yeah, I can make a comment. I think for those of you who were on the earlier part of the call and saw the panel that just ended, and Von Bergen from our manufacturing group talked about Intel's corporate goals rise, right? Responsible sourcing, inclusive supply chain, sustainable supplies, and enabling our supply chain and being a catalyst. I think having a corporate framework and a set of goals that the entire organization is focused on really leads over into our venture investing, right? It gets all of our groups aligned about what we'd like to accomplish. It enables the entire organization to look at what are the right tools in the toolkit, so to speak, for any particular situation, to address or create change. And to me, that's actually really creating a lot of momentum for us to, look for opportunities. And not everything has to be an equity investment, but everyone's kind of pulling in the same direction. So for me, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I think I would add, EMD Electronics, parent companies, 352-year-old science and technology company. So sustainability is a kind of golden thread that's essential throughout that kind of history. And I think it becomes more and more relevant, as Andy said. Customers are demanding solutions. Investors, our investors, the stock markets, governments are demanding action. We're trying to support the parent organization by leading with how we do our investments. So it's not just the things that we invest in, but how we structure those investments, the metrics that we set when we put term sheets out, when we talk to companies. And so we need to rethink a little bit, how we do all of those things. I think it's also important that we're not just talking about kind of buzzwords, that there's some meaningful substance and measurable action. And, we're inspired by people like Kyle with these, very high aspirations of greenhouse gas emissions. These are sort of thought leaders in how we can set the standards in the industry. And I think it's important that we address that not only from the corporate perspective in how we work on a day-to-day basis, how we do our science, how we approach our supply chains and our manufacture, but also just in the culture and the way that we help our portfolio companies, how we support their efforts to improve sustainability, and not just the environmental sustainability, but the full ESG package. It's broader than just the environment, and I think that's also important to consider when we look at these opportunities.
Yeah, I can share our perspectives. Actually, the Samsung is kind of good at in manufacturing so far, and in semiconductor and other products as well. But we have focused on developing the good technology, producing the better product, showing the good performance so far. But quite recently, feeling the responsibility of the environment, or even energy efficient the manufacturing technologies, and then so we are trying to find the startups developing this kind of technology that could be applicable in manufacturing side, which is quite important. So that's why the another business unit that has not funded in Samsung Ventures started to funding for us to find the investment opportunities, not only for just investment in the companies, but more about the building the ecosystem of the for sustainability of the industry, and then the ecosystem.
All right, sorry about that technical glitch. We're still here, so must be something profound that Son was saying. I think that's when we dropped. We're all back, and I think I would say when I first approached various VCs and organizations and trying to recruit them for this particular panel, it's perhaps the easiest panel that I have to put together. Everybody's super enthusiastic and basically count me in on the first ask. So that really is kind of impressive how a lot of the VCs here, as you hear from Sean and et cetera, financial return is perhaps on the highest priority. And when the topic of semiconductor sustainability comes up, they're jumping in. They're highly interested and highly motivated. So that's very encouraging to see. What maybe a question for the panelists is that we are definitely seeing a strong wave of interest in sustainability really in the last few years, and it's getting louder and louder. However, as a good investor, we all look back in history and see, have we seen this before, right? So for those of you who are old enough, who either experienced this a cleantech boom, either directly or indirectly, I wanted to get your perspective. How does this recent interest and emphasis by the industry, by the society in sustainability, how is this different from the cleantech boom? And as a venture investor, what are some of the lessons that you want, we should learn from that previous cleantech boom? So maybe I'll start with Kyle. You want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. Anybody who went through the last one has a few scars from it. Yeah, exactly. Andy's raising his hand over there. It's awesome to see the amount of interest, capital, great ideas just flowing into clean tech right now. It's really awesome. And then on the other hand, it's like terrifying, right? Because the pace that things are going at, it just feels like maybe we're going a little too fast, and you start going to your clean tech 1.0 PTSD situation of like, oh, it's going to be awesome forever, and things tend to not be awesome forever. There tend to be some ups and downs. So I'd say we're sort of balancing fear and greed right now, like as you're supposed to do in the investing world. In terms of specific lessons learned, I think a big one that I keep on seeing sort of across the board that people seem to be following through on quite well is don't just chase a market because it's large, right? It's do some segmentation to have a really good market entry strategy. And what do I mean by that? I mean, last time around, there was a lot of chasing of commodity markets, very large commodity markets, and people said, well, I'll just get 1% of this $1 trillion market. We'll be huge. It'll be awesome. Yay. And that was about the extent of the thinking for a lot of market entry. And this time around, and what you saw is these companies that started off saying they were doing biofuels, they ended up being hand cream companies. And then this time around, they're like, let's start with hand cream because it's high margin, and then we'll move to biofuels, right? Which a little more rational, little more, I'd say capital efficient. So folks are being smarter about market entry. They're being smarter about capital efficiency. And the other thing I love on the capital efficiency side is last time around is all venture capital. Like venture capital is driving everything, and that was corporate venture capital. It was venture capital funds, but it was really venture capital. This time around, you see a lot of other pools of capital that are much larger and much lower cost to startup companies that are entering, and that is great news because that tends to give long-term legs to companies as they grow. I'd say those are the two big ones that come to mind.
Excellent. Andy, you jump in?
Yeah, I don't know. When I was a kid, there was this weird movie that came out called Koyaanisqatsi. Like, have you guys heard of that one? Like,
no one's heard of that, Andy.
No one's heard of Koyaanisqatsi. I strongly recommend you read it. Like, it's one of these like 80s environmentalists, like the world is out of balance. But the whole movie is like layered over these guys chanting Koyaanisqatsi. It's far out. But I think what's different now, it's like the world is getting like increasingly chaotic on shorter time scales. And the comment I wrote down was climate change is actually caught up with the alarms that have been going off for the last couple decades, right? And it's just, I think, when I started in the wind industry in like the early 2000s, you'd walk into wind energy conferences and like 60% of the people will be like, yeah, climate change, I don't know if I really buy into it, but like, hey man, we're selling wind. And I'm here to make a buck. And it's great on ERCOT. Right. And it's like it's you fast forward today 20 years and it's just like, man, like the world's getting hotter, it's getting dustier, like droughts are increasing, like the impacts of anthropogenic emissions. Again, it's like I don't know if there's room in the world for climate deniers anymore. And if they are, they're going to be flooded on their coastal homes. And I think that reality and that like the intensity and like the increasing rates of change that we're experiencing in our lifetimes now, I think that's just kind of waking up these huge sources of capital, saying it's like, yeah, like we're not going to sit back on our laurels and just like take it. And for like Micron, who have C-level manufacturing, right? It is a potential threat into the future, and I see that sense of urgency just like ratcheted up times 100 in this wave versus the others. And yeah, I hope fear can sustain the wave, fear and like this collective effort to solve a problem that we can control.
Perfect. I like what you said, that climate change is catching up with the hype, actually. So
the world's a different place now, right? And we also have more it's nuanced. There's a lot of techno-economic detail that you need to figure out, and a small leverage here and there can make a big impact on whether you're even positive or negative in your emissions. So having those enabling infrastructures, which, to be fair, this industry's created, we should be able to benefit from. We should be able to employ those technologies to help us better to solve these problems now, and combine that with the better recognition of the problems that we're facing. I mean, there's public recognition now and pull, and that changes it from just being a push or from being an opportunistic grab for cash. So I think there's many factors which impact that. And I hope that we, as Andy said, that we're able to leverage that and grab that tailwind to our advantage, because a few of us have tried once round and we've not quite given up yet. So let's try again and see if we can get it right this time, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sung or Kyle?
I mean, I'd foot stomp what Andy was just saying about that. Did we lose it? Really interesting feedback effects, kind of all across the board that are making stuff change rapidly.
Yeah. And also, there is like an increasing if you think of customers as like a pyramid, right? And I don't know who's at the very top, Amazon probably. But everybody else is a customer of them, lower and lower. The base of that pyramid is demanding sustainability, right? Yeah. And so it goes up and up and up, and the responsibility to like feed that demand at lower levels is increasing. And again, like that's why you get like Micron's customers, these large enterprises, like global leading enterprises, making commitments on their sustainable supply chains and having that be directly influencing us. That's being driven by their customers, and I think that's exciting, right? It's just like the voice of all us little people screaming up, saying like, please help us, and deliver, like, please deliver us more sustainable products and opportunities to do the right thing as consumers. I think that's also radically different today. It's just like the consciousness of the individual, and I think it's right on.
And then maybe I'm too young to say something about the differences between green energy and then sustainability issue nowadays. But I'm not so young. But anyway, so this.
Are you calling us old?
So I mean, that's in the green energy boom, the Samsung wanted to do some business in solar panel, for example. But my understanding is that at the time it was about new business opportunity more rather than the sustainability itself. So that's why actually this solar panel has been one of our candidate for business leveraging our manufacturing technologies and then semiconductor, etc. But for now, what I see is that the sustainability is the real issue and the real threat. So we should think about not only for business, opportunity, but more about the responsibility for us and then for our, the future generation. So even because of that, even if we don't see, big, business opportunity, we should, look into the companies developing the technologies. I mean, it's not easy to make decision for investing in not generating profit companies, but even still, we should look into the company if we, could collaborate with the company so that, even for now, there is not much profit yet in their business, but if the collaboration could, bring us the better, business and then also the better, the environment friendly technologies, then it could be good for everybody. So now what I see is that the sustainability is real issue for us as well. So there could be the differences between at the time and the now.
Excellent. All right. So I guess enough of history lessons. Maybe let's dive in a little bit deeper into the specific topics of what are we going to do now for sustainability in the semiconductor industry. So just wanted to earlier some of the speakers alluded to the current semiconductor manufacturing process is becoming not only complicated but also very complex. And there are a number of different sort of innovation opportunities and technologies that could play a role here. So I wanted to ask the panelists to share, what do you see as some of the key technologies or inflection points that can make an impact in semiconductor sustainability? Who wants to start first? I'll name names. Owen.
Oh, John, thank you. Well, I mean, I think we've broken it down generally into kind of energy, materials, and water, and I think that's quite broad strokes and covers most of the areas. But there's, as I said before, it's very nuanced because energy could be a number of steps in a process. I mean, it could be the amount of consumption of a tool. What's the tool doing when nobody's using it? Is it still pumping? Is there a way to make that more efficient? So there are kind of things that individuals in the fabs can and tool manufacturers and things like that could help. Understanding how the tools are idling, but there's also how we develop the materials themselves, how we develop the processes. There's a lot of waste on the table from spending 12 months to get a product to market. Well, if we could do that in a few months, then we save a lot of time and energy. We can solve problems faster. Reducing excursions. I mean, we waste a lot of time and energy trying to figure out where problems are in processes. So even things like how we share data between us can help us to avoid some of these challenges or to be more efficient in how we deal with them as an industry and working together. I think the systems are so complex and so intertwined between design, process, and material that you cannot really tackle one without tackling the other. And I think you need to look at these really as a system approach, and we can't do that on our own. And that's why, I mean, I think as VCs, we're used to kind of dealing with these problems together, and that's maybe where we can, show leadership in the industry. But I think that's one of the important factors that we need to think about is how these things interplay together. And then, obviously with the specific challenges like certain specific materials, fluorinated surfactants. My colleague Catherine will explain some of these challenges in her talk later, so I don't want to steal all of her thunder. But there are some very specific levers that we can see within the material space where we can have a positive impact. And I think it's really identifying where are those big levers, where can we start to work, and how can we look at this as a system level so that we don't have unintended consequences. Making an improvement somewhere might make something much worse somewhere else, and that's also one of the huge challenges that we see in impact investing and sustainability in general. And that's why really these end to end is really important to look at it from kind of cradle to cradle. And I think a lot of digital solutions will be essential in amongst this as well. So I mean, that's quite a long, fluffy answer, but really I think about it as, you know, from our perspective as a materials solution provider, it's really starting from the design process, and then as one of the previous speakers said, designing sustainability in from the beginning, and working with the customers in the industry and the supply chain to ensure that there's understanding of where, you know, where we can have that biggest impact together.
So, Owen, maybe just to drill down a little bit, you kind of also previously alluded to that, you know, there are a lot of new technologies that are available now, or you know, coming on, and you know, sustainability could really, you know, we could really leverage some of these new technologies, digital technology, et cetera, to help out. So from material perspective, you know, you mentioned AI technology. What are some of the examples or some of the areas that AI technology could play a role? And you know, if companies that are in the audience that are really startup and working on AI technology, what should they be looking for?
Yeah, so I mean, we're materials research is very complex, and we see that right from university, and same with all semiconductor processes. We use things like design of experiment to be more efficient in our experimentation. How do we get to answers faster, get to insights which are complex? These are 2-factor, 3-factor interactions. So we need, you know, techniques that we can use to be more efficient in how we understand our data. But beyond that, things like, you know, you could just go brute force and think about high throughput screening. You know, historically, this hasn't been as beneficial as we might have hoped. I still have a grand hopes for this area, but I think it's combining also the empirical data with the theoretical data that you can drive from first principles, in order that you can be predictive and you don't have to go and do experiments on everything. We should be efficient in how we do experiments, and then we should make sure that we benefit from the results of those experiments to get towards products faster. So even automation in the lab is important, you know, automation of how we do manufacture. Even the way we change and do manufacture, we're traditionally batch processing. You know, moving to flow processes can be very efficient, and that can also be augmented with a lot of inline sensor design, and also AI in terms of how you do the material discovery, combined with things like quantum computing. Eventually, you know, we can start to look into really complex details that we weren't able to look at before.
Sean?
Yeah, I can make a comment. You know, in my experience doing venture investing, you know, you have a thesis and you have areas where you'd like to invest, which is very strategic. And then you're also reactive because you have opportunities that come to you, right? And so it's, I think this area is no different, right? So I think Owen highlighted, you know, a few of the kind of macro areas that many of us are interested in. But at the same time, we're looking at deal flow and trying to generate deal flow and opportunities, and those might come up in spaces, you know, that we don't expect, right? So, you know, I think fundamentally we're looking for innovation, right? How do you do something differently or better across all of those areas, right? And you know, we're looking for opportunities that, you know, can have a material effect, right? You have to be significantly better. But there are a couple of other things that could really drive interest in a company more specifically. I mean, one would be scale, right? You see a small company, great technology, but when you look at the scale of what several of our companies manufacture, it's huge, right? So we might also approach an opportunity from a perspective of how do we help them scale so that they are relevant to our industry, right? And then there are other drivers as well, and just you know, one of the social pushes here for a more sustainable manufacturing is, you know, regulatory environment around the world, and we might talk about that coming up. But how do we remain compliant with the regulations as they become more stringent? So, you know, for example, we might look for new technologies and abatement, right, which might not be a typical area where, you know, the venture community has looked in the past, but you know, there are areas for innovation there as well. So, or opportunities for innovation and opportunities for scale, right? So those are some of the other things that I look for from an investment perspective.
Excellent. So this actually kind of also tie into some other questions I'm seeing from the chat box. People are asking, what exactly is green semiconductor manufacturing, right? There are a lot of investments into clean tech, carbon captures, and et cetera, or plastic recycling. But what does it mean to be a green semiconductor beyond just buying credit? I think that ties into, Sean, what you're saying. Along the semiconductor manufacturing processes, there are many opportunities for improvement, for sustainability. So I think maybe Andy, if you wanted to elaborate that a little bit. I know you guys look at abatement, recycling, and water quite intensively.
Yeah, I think what does it mean to be like a green semiconductor manufacturer? I think it means something very different today than what it meant 10 years ago, and it'll mean something very different by the end of this decade than what it means today. And like the first comment I'll make on like the last question, yes, technology is it's a huge enabling tool. The thing that's different now, again, it's like the will of the leadership to drive the machine to optimize for efficiency and to optimize for environmental sustainability. Whereas before, that was a secondary consideration. And it's like, because our customers are driving us in that direction, and because their customers are driving it, it has to become a business decision to integrate that like optimization problem into how large companies like ourselves build products. And so it has to come top down, and it is coming top down. And I think that's the right direction. But like, what does green manufacturing look like? So yeah, about a year and a half ago, we got asked on our team to help identify startups to help make green Micron. And somebody earlier said that these are complex structures. Absolutely, it's insanely complex. I think to me, green semiconductor manufacturing is breaking manufacturing down into like the smallest possible bits that you can, and optimizing every single bit for environmental sustainability, right? And it's you have these massively complex systems. Micron is it's a distributed generator. It's a huge energy consumer. It's a water treatment facility. It's a chemical treatment facility. We're a chemical consumer. We're a direct emitter, right? We're all of these things. And so what we need to do is just break it down piece by piece. And again, like, optimize all these pieces for environmental sustainability. And as Owen was saying, it's like, have these higher level management tools to be able to like to share learnings, but also like share how designs can influence manufacturing operations, and have those work synergistically to like optimize for environmental sustainability. But again, like, simplifying the problem and breaking it down into its bits is something that Micron's going through right now. And I think it's the only way to make it go. It's just too complex a problem.
Absolutely.
So I would add, the little bit more the direct way of the green manufacturing could be, for example, high reflectivity in the lithography, high reflectivity optics in lithography tools. So meaning that I saw that the one tool in applied in one tool 1 million kilowatt per year electricity to be used. Meaning that if we could develop the better tool with high reflectivity, it would dramatically reduce the usage of electricity, for example. So meaning that the high reflectivity could help in that sense. And then on a little bit indirect way would be the way of generating electricity. So one interesting new topic we are looking into is replacing the way of generating electricity, which include the small modular nuclear reactor. So I think there'll be some debating about the nuclear reactor.
Can we spend the rest of the time debating nuclear. Like I was
Sure.
I was
understand.
thinking about that early this morning.
Right.
I was
Well,
also
I
thinking
think
about
the
fusion.
thing
Yeah.
is that, how we can, reduce the, the lot of waste or the carbon for generating the electricity. So what would be the smartest way or better way to do that?
Wait,
So
so
that is one
are you saying-
not. Yeah.
Is Samsung piloting like behind the meter electric or nuclear generation?
No, so
You're considering.
it's just seeing the opportunity or way of the reducing the all the the bad things for during the manufacturing product, right? So that would be one candidate we are looking into.
Yeah.
The direction is not been decided yet. So anyway, I'd like to share just what we are looking into nowadays for better the green manufacturing technologies. So yeah,
Yeah.
All right. A lot of debating here about that.
Yeah.
Kyle,
Excellent.
I got a question. Behind the meter nuclear, would you invest in that startup?
We don't do much nuclear investing at Breakthrough currently for a whole bunch of reasons. But I don't know. I mean, that you're going to drag me into a different rabbit hole that way with nuclear. But
Let's not do it.
I mean, I think so. Here's something I'm going to take that and turn it back into something John's going to want on our panel. So things like that, right? So you've got effort going on in these small nuclear capabilities. There's efforts going on in solar, efforts going on in wind, geothermal, like fill in the blank. There's efforts somewhere going on. And going back to what Owen said earlier about sort of systems level thinking, we exist in a broader ecosystem, right? So this is not just about what's happening in the semiconductor industry. There's huge amounts of innovation happening everywhere. And lots of pieces of those things are either currently or will become applicable to the industry, right? And so if next week there's a super cheap nuclear capability that's not going to breed plutonium, and you actually could set it up behind the meter, and you could use the thermal for process heat and get all sorts of benefits out of it, and it was like 2 cents per kilowatt hour, everybody's going to take that, right? Like people are going to jump on that because there's economic reasons to do that. There's all sorts of reasons to do that. And so that's what's pretty cool in this period of history is there's so much activity everywhere. That's sort of the underlying logic of the Industrial Revolution for the last 300 plus years has been like more productivity, do more with less. We just keep on surfing on that, right? We just keep on surfing on it. So now we're doing more with less dirty stuff, right? We're moving electrons around instead of moving around mass. We're emitting fewer HFCs, right? Things like that. It's just less waste. The process gets a little bit better. You find these lateral technologies that you can pull in, you adopt them. And that way you get both the iterative improvements over time and then the occasional huge wins where someone's like, oh man, I have a completely new chip architecture. We can totally change how we manufacture.
All right, thank you, Kyle, for saving the panel. So maybe I'll switch over to some of the questions coming from the chat. One of the question is, has Innovator's dilemma had any impact on VC investment in greener semiconductor? I myself not super familiar with this Innovator's dilemma, and I think it's referring to really sort of the between incremental improvement, incremental innovation versus some disruptive innovation, and how that play a role in in what we're trying to achieve in terms of making the semiconductor manufacturing greener. Any thoughts? Anybody want to comment?
I don't know what the Innovator's dilemma is.
Andy, you're killing me.
Who does?
So
Sure.
So basically, this you guys got to read this book. I'm going to probably mess this up myself, so people can laugh when I do. But like the basic piece is that large corporations in particular have sort of vested interests they have to serve. And if you stop serving those interests, you end up cannibalizing sales. You end up, annoying shareholders. You end up doing something that messes up your underlying business. So you don't want to stop doing those things. So an example that's often trotted out is Kodak, right? So Kodak actually invented the electronic camera, right? They invented the technology, and they sat on it forever because it would have cannibalized their film business, which was the heart and soul of their business, right? The chemicals they were making and things. And then eventually they got destroyed because the technology got out. They were still trying to serve those vested interests. The whole industry shifted, and that was in of them as a major player in cameras. And so if you're considering that to occur in the semiconductor industry, the semiconductor industry, from my perspective, is, and again, I defer to all you panelists on this after I make my half-assed assessment here as a non-industry person, but you have some inherent protection against competition because of the capital intensity of building things like fabs, and because your industry has gotten so extremely good at building the things you build, right? So for someone to come in and push you out, they would have to come up with a way of doing computing that is not based on the technologies you use and is much better. So an example might be quantum computing showing up using non-semiconductor based approaches, and suddenly the billions of dollars spent on fabs don't really matter anymore, but you're still stuck with those fabs. That's my best attempt at it.
Pretty good, Kyle. I'm impressed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would make, one comment about that is, having a corporate venture group is one way, in my opinion, that large companies try to, address the innovator's dilemma, right? We're out looking for disruptive technologies. We're out trying to learn about new markets. We're out sometimes trying to enable our organizations to change or provide that opportunity for change, so that maybe it's not quite as disruptive, right? It's more transformative for our businesses. So that's part of how I view what we do, and definitely in the day-to-day work.
Yeah, just to build on Sean's point briefly, I mean, we have all large organizations of people that are making incremental improvements, trying to address customer need, improving things. But we work in a very conservative industry for very good reason, because we need to be at zero defect. So changing things is not in our nature. And yet, by definition, disruption involves large change. So, to build on Sean's point, that's exactly where ventures gives a safe space in order that we can achieve and test out some of those things without kind of impacting the culture and the psychology of our colleagues in the day-to-day business that need to be really focused on that perfection, quality, reliability.
Yeah, I mean, the CVC should do the role of mitigate the investor innovator dilemma, meaning that our business unit is focusing on kind of continuing their business and then developing better product and the technologies. But for CVCs, corporate ventures should look into more the startup developing the breakthrough technologies it could be a good opportunities, and there also could be the threat for the current business. So in that sense, the role of the CVC could be helping them, and then helping the communication between our current business guys and then the startup developing the new technologies, so that if we could do a lot of the minimizing the gap of the communication and misunderstanding between these two parties, then I think we could minimize the dilemma. So,
about a year and a half ago, I wrote a blog piece for Micron. It's not public. It's just for my friends at Micron. But I described it was very it made a lot of people upset because like I described Micron as a giant, like just like a lumbering giant. And my job at like our job on the venture fund was to like keep punching the giant in the face until the punch got hard enough where the giant would like turn and just what. Right. And I do see that's our job. That article was published the week that the offices shut down because of COVID. Right. And it's like, so I do think, right, these corporate entities around the world, everybody was massively disrupted by the pandemic. And so it's interesting, like, I'm such a big believer in the timing of like innovations and startup. Like to me, the timing of when technologies like come into market as a startup is like 10 times more valuable than like the quality of the technology itself. It's when is that technology positioned to enter in the market. And again, like we're living through this like really chaotic world where we're all on Microsoft Teams instead of on a stage together. And all of us are simultaneously going through these sustainability transitions. I need to read the book on the innovator's dilemma. I think any innovator in sustainability right now ought to be coming to the semiconductor industry and like banging down our doors because the timing is right now. And we're like, our industry is one of the biggest like resource, like not all resources, but like we are a very large like consumer of resources. And the timing is just awesome for startups to do business with semiconductor. And again, like our job on the venture fund is to try to like find the innovators and bring them in and together punch the giant in the head.
Excellent. Yeah, not to sing our own praises, but I think as corporate venture investor, our job is to look for the disruptions that are coming for sure.
Right.
So excellent. So maybe switch topic a little bit. I think earlier, Sean, you mentioned something about, as venture investors, we obviously care about returns, and for different groups, there's a slightly different weighing, different flavors. For certain venture group, maybe financial return is the highest priority. In some other firms, it may be a 50-50. But when it comes to sustainability investments, often one would argue you have to make some sort of trade-off between financial returns and environmental returns. So I guess the question for the audience is really, how do you balance financial returns and sustainability returns, and how do you sort of adjust your investment criteria and your decision process to really allow you to make financially attractive, sustainability investments?
Right. Well, I think the fundamental premise is risk and reward, right? So if the risk is lower, would you be happy with a slightly lower financial return, right? So your expected return is actually quite good, right? And to me, I think that's how I look at it a bit, right? If you have the power of a large company behind you with some known issues, and you can analyze the situation and do two things. One, you can develop an estimate of the expected benefit to your operating business, first thing. Second thing is you can try to estimate what the expected return would be. And then between, your knowledge of those two situations, you can assess the risk, right? Is it a lower risk because we have a great understanding of the problem? Is it a lower risk because we can come in and test a technology and understand whether or not it works for us or not quickly? That's part of the fail fast concept in Innovator's Dilemma, not to take us back there. We can be, I think we can have some flexibility, right? But, at the end of the day, the business case and the financial case have to hold together because, we've looked in the past, if a company is not viable, which means, some level of financial stability and success, you're not going to generally get that strategic return or that business impact as well. So I think we can look at both parts of that equation with a fair amount of clarity.
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and you know, a company that can't make money is not a company in the end. So you have to be able to see the financial return. Also, some of the companies which I mean, let's just take a hypothetical situation. If you're a heavily polluting company, are you ever going to be economically viable in a few years' time if you know carbon prices go up and things like this? I mean, it's an existential threat, so it increases the risk, as Sean points out. I mean, I think it's still a little bit aspirational, but you know, I'm hoping that we can put ESG targets in the same and balance in the same way that we do financial, team, IP, you know, all of the strategic value. It should be on an equal pairing with all of those things, and then you balance within a portfolio approach. But it's not either or; it has to be and.
Yeah, and then for us, I mean, you know, considering the size of our business unit and Samsung Ventures is, you know, business unit much bigger than, you know, Samsung Ventures. So in this sense, what we hear from our business unit is actually, hey, don't try to make money, but don't lose money, kind of things. So meaning that, you know, strategic value is more important than, you know, making money. But still, we are investors, so we have to make money. I mean, so that's how we could have some tactic like this. I mean, we are operating funds, so, you know, not just, you know, one by one play, but more about the fund play. So if we could, you know, make money from other investment, and then we could manage that to take a risk in investing in the less, you know, financial, you know, capital gain based investment in sustainability. So I think that could be one of the, you know, way to avoid of the burden feeling about the, you know, less profit or more risky investment in sustainability at this point.
So I mean, I also agree with Owen and Sean that these are not mutually exclusive things, right? The photovoltaic industry wouldn't exist if people couldn't make money in it at the end of the day. And the ability to make money is just all it tells you is that people want that demand or service, right? That's the only message that you're getting when you find a way to make money. You actually found something that society wants and or needs. And so, you know, we're a venture capital fund that is focused on climate. That's all, like the entire creation of Breakthrough was to help solve climate change as a problem. But the reason we're a venture capital fund is because of that ethos, right? If you don't create something that is economically viable, there's just no, it's going to be a waste of resources.
Yeah.
I'll throw in real fast. Like, we made the decision, we're not gonna lower our financial bar to do investments in sustainability, right? And it was actually like a hard personal decision, but I think it's right. You know, it's these technologies have to be, if you want to grow fast and take venture money, you have to have a venture business. And I think what's interesting that we can play as investors / potential customers is scaling is helping on productization and scaling those technologies lightning fast, right? 10 times faster than would have been done without you know that investment and that like facilitation of like moving into these corporate entities. Yeah, but it's a hard line to walk, but like Sean said earlier, you know, just because like our role isn't always investing, right? And I think that's the interesting opportunity like we have to play is, you know, sometimes much more valuable is an introduction and collaborations with our internal teams to helping productize and with go to market and early industry wins.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're a tool on the spectrum, and governments are there to subsidise. You know, we're there to do these scale-ins, and as Andy says, right. So this is a different. There's certain things that fit with the venture model, and there's certain things that don't. And I think, you know, that's startups need to be aware of that as we approach these kind of opportunities. You know, we can't be relying on subsidies and changes in things like that. You know, but there are opportunities for companies doing that, but they're just not VC backable in the way that we would approach it, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to add to what Owen's saying, I run into people all the time who have really interesting ideas for businesses that they shouldn't be taking venture capital money, right? They should just go build that business. They should go bootstrap it. They should take some friends and family money and just go grow it, because it just grows in a different way than venture capital is looking for. That doesn't mean it's not a business. That doesn't mean it can't do good things for the semiconductor industry. It just means it's going to scale differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kyle, maybe, since you are the only non-corporate VC and non-semiconductor specific VC, so really curious to get your perspective, as part of Breakthrough Energy, as part of one of the biggest impact investor. What's your view of the sustainability investment specifically in the semi space, And, I'm sure you've seen a lot of sustainability related companies and technologies. Are there any that you can see that can play a role in the semiconductor space?
Yeah, definitely. So we at Breakthrough, we haven't specifically chased the semiconductor industry as an area to do investment. And that's not because it's not an important part of the economy. It's more because of these internal rules we have around our investment, right? So we're looking for 500 megaton opportunities. And the good news for the semiconductor industry is it doesn't appear to be an industry emitting more than 500 megatons of GHG equivalent on an annual basis, which is, it means in the overall scheme of things, it's not as big a problem. But you still have to solve every problem. And so sorry
to interrupt, do you include like the use of the semiconductors within that? So
no. It's a pretty narrow box. Box. Yeah. So I'm just looking like making the
devices themselves.
Yeah. Right. So narrow box. But that said, a lot of the things we're looking at cut across multiple industries, right? So pretty much every industry needs thermal energy. There's some really interesting technologies coming out for using renewables as a thermal energy source. Everybody needs electricity. I mean, that's the renewables are taking over the grid globally, and there's all sorts of interesting work going on to make that happen. The Industry 4.0 stuff that's been brought up previously, there's all sorts of interesting things going on, bringing in techniques and technologies to make manufacturing more efficient. And so there's a lot of things we are playing in that aren't directly focused on, making silane or something like that, but they can be beneficial. And I think that's important if you're in a startup to do a bit of lateral thinking about, okay, I'm running I have a really cool new technology for 3D printing of metals. How can I use that technology? Well, maybe it would be really good for heat exchangers, and the semi industry really needs better heat exchangers, right? So there's some lateral thinking ways to get into it without, charging head on into better ways to make silicon boules.
I think I really agree with that. When we're looking at semiconductor manufacturing processes, these are super complex and highly connected processes and systems. It is actually very difficult for a startup company to come in and say, I'm going to revolutionize this whole system. I'm going to optimize your system that your thousands of engineers already worked on for years and years and years. So I think a lot of the startup companies, their opportunity comes in where they can make improvements or innovations in particular components, something that I think Andy alluded to earlier. For example, we've seen Breakthrough Energy make an investment in a company called Turntide. That's something that intrigued me. I don't know if it is applicable to the semiconductor industry, but that's a high efficiency motor technology. And immediately in my head is like, we run all sorts of pumps and vacuums and HVAC system in semiconductor manufacturing processes. This could potentially be very interesting. So this is an example, I think, of technologies that are maybe not really in the semiconductor space, really in the general sustainability space, but can have a profound impact in semiconductor.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree, John. And thanks for bringing up Turntide. And I'll put Andy on the spot since he's used to be on the financial side. Andy, in your old job, like looking at AI tech, I'm sure you came across stuff that matters here as well. But what do you think?
What's the question? What spot am I on?
Financial VC investment in technologies that can be beneficial to the semiconductor industry. Go.
Oh, yeah, I don't wear that hat anymore. No, to me, if I was at my old fund, my previous fund, right, and I've seen this so much with, like, at Micron, I'd if someone's saying I'm selling into semiconductor, I'd say, great, what's the TAM? Like, or what's your SAM? How big is that market? And they say, well, it's, if we scale this out, it's $200 million a year. And then you're just like, all right, next. I don't invest in $200 million a year companies. You've got to show me that huge vision. I think, but if you came out and say, and you said, look, we're scaling with semiconductor, and we're, this is a general purpose technology. We've productized in semiconductor, but there's this path to go into other industries, and we're doing it with semiconductor because there's a high technology barriers to entry, like really rigid requirements on the quality of the product, and on like operational uptime. Like we have like really strict requirements of like whatever quadruple, quintuple nines. It's if I was a general investor, if you can like harden the product in semiconductor, you have a high probability of success of being able to deploy it into other industries that may not have such high requirements. That's one of our theses around aquamembranes, and I think it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Before I joined Micron, I didn't care about the semiconductor industry as an investor. I thought it was interesting. I think that the technology is cool. And now that I'm here, it's like part of our job is to bring in that like outsider thought, to challenge Micron's assumptions and our assumptions as center of the universe, but then position us to be successful in working with these startups to help them grow. And I think again, it's one of these things that like it's just a hard path to walk.
So maybe just to follow up on that, Andy, I think when you and I earlier were talking, like I said, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of startup companies that are really working in the sort of semiconductor sustainability space. There are tons of sustainability general companies out there. So why is that the case, and why? What makes it sort of uniquely challenging to get into the semiconductor space? I think I kind of know the answer, but the question is then, okay, what we here wanted to do is to encourage more and more startup companies to come in and look at this space and look at application in the semiconductor space. And so for them, what's the upside for them, and why should they spend time and effort work on such a complex and extremely high demanding type of technology and build a business here?
Yeah, if anybody else has feedback, feel free to jump in. To me, the two challenges in the effort last year that we did, and in Canvas, we went out and canvassed the world for semiconductor startup or sustainability startups that could bring value to our operations. The feedback was it's a niche market, which going out on our own as one customer, yes, Micron is an $80 billion company, but it is relatively nichey, and two, we have high barriers to entry. So and especially with water, so everybody was productizing for municipal solid waste, which is just like a dramatically different engineering environment than Micron and semiconductor. And so those were kind of the two things that we just heard a lot of last year. The way that we're solving it, or that we think we're solving it, we'll actually be talking about later today, is going out collectively as an industry, right? And so Micron on its own is one entity, excellent. But if you go out with Micron, Intel, Lam, Applied, Samsung, if we go out together and like really signal this like high intensity demand now for these new technologies, which is what we're going to be doing, I think the hope is that we change the dialogue, right, from we're semiconductor, we're looking for startups who are productized for semiconductor, to encouraging innovations and startups who have a new technology that enables sustainable operations. And they say, hey, here's our thing. What do you guys think? Semiconductor industry, what do you think? How can the semiconductor industry help us productize this and accelerate this into Micron to solve your problems, into Intel, into the semiconductor industry as a whole? And I think, and that's one thing that we're working on and doing. And I think by changing that dynamic, the hope is that it drives more like external innovation into our operations.
Yeah, I mean, it's an industry which you don't know where the problems are unless you've come from it, and I think sustainability hasn't been high on the agenda for people in the industry. So, the entrepreneurs from the semiconductor industry that are creating the startups for the semiconductor industry are not typically moving in the sustainability field. And likewise, people from the sustainability area look at the semiconductor industry; it's a kind of closed book. So, I think that boils. It's our responsibility to look for those opportunities, help the company see how it can fit, and make the problems clear. Communicate the problems clearly, so that the entrepreneurs and the people with the creations are able to bring those to bear for our industry. It's a niche, but it's a big niche, and it's a lot of value in it. So there is a lot of people, and we're an engaged community that are quite willing to put the effort and the support in, and the financial resources and the in-kind resources from our companies to support those initiatives.
I would emphasize the importance of collaboration with the one example that announced the acquisition, developing the EUV photoresistant material, have had investors from chip makers and equipment companies and material companies. So what I heard from the CEO of the company is that it is quite challenging to manage the whole strategic investors, but the way of the company could be successful to be coming in the real industry was to having the investors from strategic the companies, and then doing the lot of collaboration with the customer, and then collaborate, and then by having them as an investor. So definitely it actually could be applicable in sustainable, sustainability industry as well.
So, all right, we're actually right towards the end of the talk. We'll probably extend this just a little bit to make up for the technical glitches that we had earlier. So maybe a last question for the panelists, just to for all the startup companies out there, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of if they wanted to, apply their technology, sustainability technologies into the semiconductor industry? What advice would you have for them, and what kind of homework they would need to do, and what kind of help they should seek from semiconductor investors?
Yeah, I'll comment. Yeah, so I think your term homework is correct, right? If a company comes to me and says, I'd like to sell into semiconductor, can you take a look at this and tell me if I'm relevant? That's a lot of work for me. They're basically asking me to do their business development work for them, and it becomes a bandwidth issue and a prioritization issue. So I would say at least do a modicum of work looking at industry specifications to understand how relevant you are to those. Find a consultant, somebody from the industry who can coach you on that. If you're not hitting the targets today, that's fine. We can still have a discussion. That's what capital for. But throwing something against the wall to see if it sticks is not a good use of time. And that goes for startups, and it goes for even slightly larger companies that need capital to kind of scale their business or take that risk to get into our market with an established technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I mean, that was the thing. I hate gushing on aquamembranes, but that was the thing that like caught our eye was the CEO Craig. He had built and sold water products into semiconductor in past lives with GE Digital, and it just made it so easy. The thing that we're working on, and again we'll talk about more later today, is setting up structures to support innovators who don't have that exposure and get them that connection with industry technologists and people who are expert in how to productize, how to go to market in semiconductor to bring new technologies into our operations faster. And that's something that we're working on actually collectively and really focusing on inside of Micron is how do we decrease these barriers to entry. And also, how do we accelerate new technologies who don't know how to sell into semiconductor or deploy into semiconductor? How do we accelerate it to make it happen?
For sure. Anybody else want to come on?
I guess, and then we send them to Kyle, and he gives them lots of money, and then everything is great.
And everyone high fives! Yay!
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I mean, you know, every startup has their own story and then good, you know, vision. Technically, I think for them to come in semiconductor, specifically in, you know, sustainability, you know, field, I think having the sponsor in their customer would be very important. So if, you know, not just saying that, hey, we are developing the good technologies and that we can help you to, you know, build better, you know, facilities, but more about having key person in their customer so that they could hear from the kind of friend in the customer side and then know what they need really. And then, you know, so that they could start the real discussion from that. So that could be one tip for the startups, I think.
Okay. Well, there's one more. I would say this is a comment from the chat box that, you know, we talked about getting together with the semiconductor venture ecosystem and rally the folks to look at more of sustainability. The comment or suggestion is perhaps we should also consider adding adjacent spaces like space, defense, and government ventures as part of this conversation to bring in more discussions and also bring in more ideas. So I think that's a really good suggestion. And, you know, at the next venture forum, we'll for sure sort of expand our scope, not just have Kyle, you as the only non-semi here. I think we're just slightly over time, and we will give everybody a break. And at I would say 11:30, we have scheduled the Sustainable Insight session, where we will invite a number of technical experts to come in and dive in a little bit deeper into the semiconductor manufacturing process and really tease out where some of the issues and where some of the innovation opportunities are. So thank you very much again, everyone on the panel. It's been a fun discussion and lively and fun discussion with all of you. So I'll see you, everyone, in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.